Hello Year 11. This is a video to show you how to do exercise 4F, suitability of sample types. Hopefully by now you know there are, four different types of sampling methods. You've got a random sample, a stratified random sample, which means you divide everything into subgroups like you do at school, Year 7, Year 8, Year 9, Year 10, Year 11, Year 12. You have self-selected sampling, where the participants actually choose, like a ringing into a radio station, or systematic sampling, like you have on an assembly line, where you pick every 10th or every 20th part that is made. So let's have a look at question 2, because it was pretty hard. Question 2 has 200 students in Year 11 and 12 were asked whether or not they'd ever smoked a cigarette, and here were all their results. So you need to know they're in lots of 5. So the top row was the first 50 responses. I went across ways. The second row was the next 100, and then so on and so on for the 200. Now, because we're asking all of the students in Year 11 and 12 at this stage, this is a census. Okay, and there's no numbers involved. It's either yes or no. So therefore, it is a categorical data. C said calculate the proportion of all students who said they smoked. So you basically had to count all the yeses. So I counted all the yeses and I got 96, so 96 out of 200. Okay, and I reduced that fraction, or I changed it to a decimal, 12 over 25 or 0.48. Question D then said, what proportion of the following number of students said they smoked? Are these samples representative of all Year 11 and 12 students at the school? So for the first 5 students, I had a look, there was only one yes. So therefore I've created a fraction of 1 over 5, and I multiplied by 200 because there was 200 students. And I got an answer of 40. So that is actually not indicative of what we worked out in part C up the top. Now in D part 2, the first 10 students, I counted all the yeses. In the first 2 sets of 5s, there was only 2. So for the first going across, there's only 2 out of 10. And if I multiply that by 200, I get 40. Now again, just above, we figured out that it was 96 out of 200. So a number of 40 out of 200 is not indicative of the total population. So what this question is trying to show you is that D is actually showing you that picking the information this way really doesn't give you a proper sense of what the students are answering. Now question A got pretty tricky. It says, using a table, calculator or computer, generate a set of random numbers to select a random sample of the following number of students. All right, so this is what I did. It's down here. I'll try and make it a bit bigger. So first of all, down the very bottom, go away, you have to use the random number generator on your calculator to do this part of the question. Now for the Sharp, you press second function 7 and then equals. For the Casio, you press shift and then the decimal point and then equals to get a random decimal to come up. To find the number that you want out of 200, you then multiply that by 200. So I figured out, I have a Casio, so I press shift and then dot, and the random number symbol came up. I figured out over here that if you then press times 200 before you press equals, you can do it a little bit faster. So I then pressed equals, and then all I had to do to get the next number is just keep pressing equals. And it changed to a new number out of 200 for me. So in EI, if you do this on your calculator, you're not going to get the same answers as me because it's supposed to be random. So don't expect the same numbers as me. But this is how you do it. So I pressed the equals 5 times and wrote down the numbers every time I pressed the equals. And I got 128, I got 181, 114, 32 and 84 for E. So what that meant I had to do next was I had to go up to my numbers here. Or sorry, those yes and no's. So the first couple were 128, 181 and 114. So for 128, I actually had to find the 128th response. So the first 2 rows are 100. Next 2 sets are to 110. Then the next 2 sets I've marked there to 120. So you go across another 8 and you'll figure out that it's this one here. I'll make it red so it stands out. So it's that one there. So that was my 128th score, so that's why I wrote no there. So that's what you have to do. So for 181, I'll do this one for you. 181, I've got to go, right. So 150 is to here. 160 is to here. 170 I've written there. 180 is to here. So 181 is that one there. So this was really time consuming. I had to go through and I had to do that for all of these numbers. Took me ages, okay? That's why it's taken me so long, Zach. And I did that again for E part 2. Now you'll notice up here I've got 2 out of 5 times 200 equals 80. So when I did it that way, I looked at all my numbers. Here they are here. Notice how there's only 2 yeses in this particular sample for me. So that's why I've got 2 yeses out of a possible 5. So that's where I've got the 2/5 from. And then again, I multiply that by 200 and it gives me an answer of 80. So at least doing your sample this way, it's getting a number a little bit closer to this number up here, which was 96. Okay, that's indicative of the whole population because we worked this out. So what it's trying to show you is when you use different sampling methods, you actually do get some numbers that are closer to what the actual answer should be. So the actual answer should always be 96 out of 200. We're trying to see which sampling methods are best to get us to that number. All right, so to do number 20, I had to do the same thing again. Okay, so that's over here. This time you had to do the same thing. So you had to press shift or second function, decimal point or 7 for the sharp, times by 200, and then just keep pressing the equals, because this time you need 20 different numbers. So every time a number came up, if it's to a decimal, 1 decimal place, just round it to the nearest whole number. I wrote down all the numbers first, and then I went back and I figured out which one of those numbers represented a yes or a no answer. Very tedious, time consuming, but you actually need to know how to do this because this is actually going to be in your assignment. So please practice this. All right, so that's what I got for this one. Now you're probably wondering, where did I get 9 out of 20 from? So I'm just going to show you. So when I went through all those scores up here and I wrote down what the 92nd score was, I got this. Now you have to count how many yeses you have. So when I count, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's where I got my 9 out of my 9 out of 20 from. So to figure out how many in my sample that is, I'll go 9 over 20, because that's the 20 numbers I counted, times 200, and I got an answer of 90. Now that's getting pretty close to that 96 that is the actual number. Okay, so that's using random sampling. Okay, so now this question here, F, is now asking you to use systematic sampling. That's when you take every 10th or every 5th, okay? So let's have a go. It wants me to pick 10 numbers. So to figure out which nth number I take, I've got to do my total of the candidates, 200 students, and divide by 10. When I do that, that tells me that I have to pick every 20th student. So the first thing I did was I used my random generator number, to find the starting point. When I did that on my calculator, I did shift dot or second function 7 equals times 200. I got an answer of 60. You'll get a different answer, okay? It shouldn't automatically be 60. So that told me to pick every 20th. So if I add 20 to 60, I get 80. And then I add another 20, I get 100. So I did that. I kept going, kept adding 20 to the previous number, 120, 140, 160, okay, until I got 10 scores, isn't it? Yes, because I need 10. And up here it asked me for 10, right? So I had to get 10 different scores. So you've got to go back up to the original. So the first score was the 60th. So if you're not sure, you've got to go back to here and you've got to read off the 60th score. Now this one was a little bit easier because it ended up just being, I'll do it in a different colour, how about black? It ended up just being the last ones here. Okay, so that made it, oh, not that one, sorry, get rid of that, this one. Okay, so that made it a little bit easier. So I just had to go pretty much throughout all of these. Oh, I did it again. And I had to write down all of those, okay? And they ended up being my 60th, 80th, 100th. I just did that wrong, didn't I? It's supposed to be every 20th. Anyway, okay, we'll figure it out in a minute. So I did it correctly. I'm not saying it correctly right now. So when I looked at the 60th, that was a Y. When I looked at the 80th, that was also a Y. Okay, and I've circled the incorrect ones up there in black, my apologies, but those numbers down there in green are correct. So then what I did, I counted how many yeses I had out of that 10. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That gave me 5 out of 10. Multiplied that by the 200 students, and I got an answer of 100. Now again, that's getting closer to the 96, isn't it? Now, obviously, the more numbers you use, the closer and closer you're going to get. So again, I did the same sort of thing. This time, I did 200 divided by 40, because that's the number they wanted us to, they wanted 40 students altogether. So that told me to pick every 50th student, fifth student, use your random number generator to get your start. I got a starting point of 140. Notice they all go up by 5s. You got to read them off, all those yes, no's up there and get the right ones. I ended up having 18 yeses out of the 40. I times that by 200 and I got another number pretty close to 90. So the more scores you use and the different types of generating, especially when they're random, you should get numbers that are actually closer to this actual number of 96 out of 200. Okay, so that was the hard one. So here is question 1, just in case you're not sure. E says the school principal wants a sample of teachers to estimate how much homework is set at night. Now, when I first read that, I thought, well, that could be random if it's just teachers. In the answers, it does say stratified, but I don't think this question actually gives you enough information. So if they wanted to know how much homework each class was getting per year, then I really think that needs to be stated in the question. So stratified if it's per year maybe, but since it's not really stating that, I would say it's random. Question F says a shoe company employs 5 machinists. A weekly quality control check of their work is required. So anything to do with machinists or assembly lines is usually always systematic, okay? Every 10th, every 20th. A medical journal advertises for volunteers. Right, anytime volunteers are being asked, it's automatically a self-selected sample. All right, this one's going on too long. 4F1, estimating the responses of a population from a representative sample. We have a sample of 50 people from a population of 70,000. Here we go. We've got 2 questions. Should a new cinema be built in the centre of town? We've got some yes and no responses and unsures. Is the public transport system adequate? We have, again, some yes and no responses and unsures. So the first one, A, says calculate the percentage of the sample who answered yes. So I did 21 over the 50 people asked, and I times it by 100 to find a percentage. 42% was the answer. Now, to estimate the number of people from the entire population, you have to multiply by the 70,000. That gave me 29,400. Okay, so the entire population who would think the public transport system is inadequate. So, I think I got that wrong. So that should have been a no, shouldn't it? My bad. Let me change that right now. So I should have said, it says inadequate. I didn't read that. I read adequate. Adequate is this one here. This one is actually inadequate, isn't it? So I should have done 27 over 50. It's not that. Hopefully on your calculator you can figure that one out and help me out. All right, and then this one, estimate the number of people from the entire population who would be unsure about whether the public transport system is adequate. Well, then I take that number there, 5, and that one is definitely correct. All right, now I did the next one. I'll show it to you briefly so you can see my answers. Let me know if you think I'm wrong. This video is going way too long, so I'll talk soon. Bye.